following content contains personal experiences of our hosts and guests. We are not experts in this matter. We encourage challenging conversations with others and to achieve healing from our childhood. We hope to connect and allow a safe space to have an open discussion. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional, diagnosis, or treatment.
Even better.
Oh my God. You opened your mouth.
I know.
Oh. Your mom's watching. Shame. Shame.
Shame right there. Actually, we should start off with this.
The hiya. Yeah.
Shame.
Shame.
Okay. So good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome back to another episode of
welcome
First
back, everyone.
Generation Podcast. We are here again at the lovely Spotify studios. Thank you for having us. We have a fun little topic we wanted to go over. We've been chatting about this for a couple weeks now. Still true to this day, even though we're adults, still live through our parents' judgment, this feeling of shame and guilt that lives within us. And again, we're speaking of our personal experiences as first generation Filipino Americans. So this is speaking our truth and experience with that type of upbringing. And yeah, we wanted to chat more about it because it comes heavy, and it's always there, whether it's visiting home or going to a family gathering. There's like this lingering feeling of shame or guilt or not good enough, you know?
Yeah, and it carries on with you throughout your life, like in work, relationships, and for me personally, I'm always so anxious.
Yeah.
Anxiety,
That word, which we didn't grow up with. So it's like, really,
and you're shamed for that
you're
too.
shamed. They're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, oh, it's called anxiety.
Yeah.
There's a word for it nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, it's existed before, but it's not a common household name or vocabulary that you hear at home.
It's very taboo.
Yep. Unfortunately.
Speaking of shame.
What would your mom think if she saw that? Yeah.
She would actually probably like it.
She probably would.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to describe it for those that are watching what you just you just pulled out?
Yeah. So I guess this is kind of I've seen this before, but it's a barrel with a man, and when you pull it up, his little, can I say penis on the air?
You could totally say whatever you want. Penis
comes out. So
yeah, in the Philippines, this is a barrel man.
Barrel man, I guess.
And
here we are talking about shame.
Shame of our natural beauty or natural physicality. Shame game.
Yeah,
shame game.
I guess like this topic came up because I was talking to Tiff like 3 weeks ago, and I wasn't feeling well. Like I kind of just felt like stuffy and congested, and I think it was just allergies. And my mom's like, it's because you weren't wearing your hood. You weren't dressed warm enough. And I'm like, dude, I was, first of all, dressed very, very warm. But throughout my childhood, whenever my brother and I would get sick, it was like, oh, it's because you didn't wash your hands before you ate, or you weren't dressed properly, or you stayed out in the rain too long. And as a child, it's like, dude, I'm just a child. Like,
right.
How's that my fault?
it's always something, and I think maybe with a lot of moms in general, and especially our moms, it's like, this is the reason why Y happened is because X. You didn't do X right. You know?
Yeah.
Like there's always this cause and effect when they don't have the full story, you know? I mean, the same thing happened with me recently. It's still, again, to this day, I'm a grown adult. I'm a mom of myself, you know? And my mom already accusatory about why I'm feeling sick. And yeah, it was like allergy season. There was a lot of wind that happened.
Oh yeah, rain, wind, you
Rain,
name
wind.
it.
This is the springtime. Pollen's in the air. So yeah, I was feeling under the weather as well, and so was my son. And just recently, I had to go through some medication because I was not feeling better with regular over the counter meds.
Hmm.
And my mom was like, "Oh, it's because I went on a trip to see family recently
Hmm.
to Vegas." And she's like, "Oh, you got it. You got sick because you were in Vegas." And I'm like, you don't know the full story, Mom.
Right.
My kid was sick the week before, and I was already feeling sniffly
Hmm.
during that time. And my kid had a fever, like all these things that led to, yes, I did get a little more sick. That's outside of allergies. And she didn't know that. She's like, "Oh, I didn't know." And I'm like, "Well, then
Right.
don't,
Don't assume.
don't assume, don't accuse
Don't jump to
saying like, "Oh,
conclusions.
it's because you were out partying in Vegas." Like this whole
Well, no, just kidding.
this whole like not getting all the information and
Yeah.
assuming her word is correct.
Yeah.
So it's like now I have to like correct her or like let her know like that's not the full story and you need to get your facts straight before
Mhm.
just accusing like, "Oh, it's because you didn't do this. Oh, it's because you were out in Vegas and traveling and that's where you got sick." I'm like, "No, my kid was sick before and I think I got whatever was being passed around his daycare, or passed around his preschool." So still to this day, she think like, the whole mother knows best, like, "Oh, you shouldn't have done this," or like, "Maybe
Mhm.
you shouldn't go do that,"
Mhm. Yep.
is always lingering to this day.
Yeah.
But it's there.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's there.
It's there. Yeah, and I think like uh, for me like the other thing is that talking about your feelings and your emotions. It's
Yes.
like not something I grew up with at all. If I was sad about something, it's like, why are you sad? You shouldn't be.
Right.
And
Hide your feelings. Like,
right,
yeah,
yeah.
suck it up.
And so I grew up that way and it was fine for a little bit until high school, college. I started getting into relationships with people and people are just like, why can't you like just express
Express
yourself?
yourself.
I'm like, I
Yes.
don't know how. And now it's like I'm overcompensating because I'm expressing it in a not so healthy way. It's okay, I'm going to therapy for that. All good. But yeah, it's almost like for them, they had to grow up in a different generation, and I understand they had to go through certain things where it's like, okay, just toughen up. Like, there's no time to cry about things. Like, I understand there's like certain things like, you can't be sitting around and dwelling on it, but expressing your emotions and your feelings, especially as a young child, is so important in development and growth, I think. I mean,
100%.
you have a son, so I'm sure that you encourage that
Yep.
and you lean into that. And so we didn't have that growing up. And I think that's affected my adult life a lot. And now I have to reverse that in some way and deal with it. But yeah, that was like a major thing. And, in high school, I was suffering from anxiety and depression. I had a lot of things that, a lot of trauma that I had to go through. And so I had to go to therapy. And that was a very taboo subject. And thankfully, my brother encouraged my mom and talked to her and said, hey, like, mental health is just as important as physical health. And she just didn't understand.
So
She's like,
good.
she didn't know what like depression was, anxiety, and I had to go on medication. And she was just like, no, this is like not real. Like, there's nothing
Right.
wrong
There's
with
nothing
her.
wrong with you, right?
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
the denial
The
that
denial.
you're fine, you're fine.
Yeah.
You'll get over it, right?
Yeah. You'll get over it. Just like we had to go through
Hardship, hard
hardship.
times.
We got over it. So I mean, eventually she learned to understand and she is more understanding now. But imagine when you're like 15, 16 and you're not well developed, you're not mature yet, and you're getting like, all these conflicting views on mental health. So that was like something that I struggled with a lot. But even now, when I'm sad, she's like, Why are you sad?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's fine. Everything's like
Yeah.
this facade of trying to be like everything's all right. This
Mhm.
picture perfect, outlook of like people seeing our family or just seeing, oh, you have such a beautiful family. Everything's so great. And then I'm like, it's not the full story.
Yeah. I mean, it's pride. Like, our family is very prideful, and pride is a good thing, I think. But also, it's like, to your point, oh, like, we want to, like, make ourselves look impressive towards everyone and perfect.
Right.
Um,
Which is not,
yeah,
it's not
everyone
true.
has
Everyone
problems.
has things, and
Mhm.
it's like this whole making someone proud. I don't know. I feel like I always go back to this, like Mulan, the Disney movie, the cartoon version was always one of my favorites growing up. Where it's like making your ancestors proud was like one
Mm.
of the things, and that's generational. Where um, bring honor to us all was the thing for ancestors, and it's like all our previous generations before us, our grandparents, like everyone going way back is like on our shoulders, and like we're carrying all this into
Mhm.
our current life and then to the next generation. It's it's a I feel is a heavy burden that this is why I'm very cognizant of how I'm raising my kid too, is just like the cycle to be aware of and unpack whatever that generational baggage that was from before us. And I am trying to connect with my mom in a way to understand where she's coming from,
Yeah.
but it's also it's a two-way street. Like it's
Yep.
very one way right now where she gets very guarded.
Yeah.
um and like one time I brought up um just how overprotective she was, and she does this with my kid too, and which I talk to her about as much as I can. I'm like, hey, this is not how I want to raise him. Or like I asked her, like, is this how you were brought up? Like, what was it back then in the Philippines that you've experienced of why you're so protective?
Mm.
And then she actually flipped it to being here in America. She was like, "Oh no, it's not whatever happened in the Philippines. It's everything on the news." Like she's very listens to the news. Like that is like her blueprint or Bible to everything. It's like,
Hmm.
and that's why she always has these crazy ideas of like, oh, don't go hiking at night. You might get attacked by a mountain lion, or like hearing just these one off stories that
Yeah.
won't happen to everyone.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it does happen, yes. But she thinks it's gonna all these terrible things will happen to me.
Yeah.
And I get it. It's great that she's protective, but it's just overbearing. And she didn't open up to whether it is something of her family dynamic that I'm still trying to learn from her that she's not expressing. And I hear, I could easily talk to like your mom or one of the other
Mm.
uncles, aunties about our family history, because it's just more opening up. And like you said, tying everything back, talking about feelings, unpacking these things is not an easy thing, and it's not an easy thing for me either. And
Mhm.
I'm sure it's not easy for my mom to express. Yes, I'm sure there was trauma back then that
Mhm.
she hasn't unpacked herself,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she got defensive, and I recognize that. I'm like, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna go dive into
Yeah.
this, but it is something I'm trying to learn more while I have her here in our current life. So it's like we should talk about it, right?
Yeah.
We should talk about it, learn from it, and trying to make some change.
Yeah.
Because right now, it would suck if this is just our relationship. It's not as tight as I'd want it to be.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
and the forgiveness of it too is what I'm also going to therapy for. So yeah, it's
Lots
a
of
lot.
therapy here,
A lot of
man.
therapy. Ain't nothing wrong with therapy. I think it's a good thing. And I even ask her, it's like, hey, have you talked to someone about any of this, like with grief and all that? Because she's going through a lot of stuff too. So it's like
Sure. Yeah.
a lot to unpack, and you need to talk to someone professional to hopefully give some advice for mental health. And like, it's so great that Kuya Mark advocated for mental health, because it's in the word. It's still health.
Yep. Yeah.
Physical, mental, like it's our body, it's our being that needs some healing. You
Yeah.
know.
Well,
So
one affects the other. So like mental health
right,
affects your physical health. Your physical health
mind,
affects your
body,
yeah,
mind, body,
mind,
soul.
body, spirit.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's all connected. What is it in Tagalog? Bahala ka?
Oh yeah.
Or like,
Right. Yeah. Like, what does that mean? Like something. Go ahead with your
yeah,
life. No.
just you're on your own, or like you
Right.
go do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a sense is I think what the phrase means. When I think growing up, when my mom would say that, it's normally against whatever she's
Right. It's
prescribing
almost
to me.
like,
It's
yeah.
like, oh, fine, then you go do that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, I will. I don't need your permission.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that I remember that being like a term used.
It's kind of like saying, "Hey, I did all this for you."
The sacrifices I've
Yeah.
done for you.
And it's making you feel guilty.
Yeah.
So you have to follow what they want you to do.
Right.
Is that an accurate statement?
That sounds pretty accurate. I would say so.
Yeah. And so I mean culturally, like if we think about just how Filipinos, like the family culture is like, yes, your parents like provide for you. They make these sacrifices and they choose your career path for you and how they want you to live your life. And if you go against that, it's like saying, "Oh, well, I did all this for you." So it's like, you know, I did like so you have to follow what we say almost, I think. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
not
no, it's
translating
like
correctly,
it's
but
kind of like the wasted effort they put, and
yeah.
then we drop the ball. You know what I'm
Yes. Okay,
saying?
that's mhm.
And and with that, there's a term, this cultural value within the Filipino culture. It's called Utang na loob, which translates to depth of gratitude. And this refers to a reciprocity that's, doing what's good for the collective. Doesn't matter if it's your individual, passion or what you really want to do. It's like, is this good for the family,
Yeah.
essentially,
Yeah.
And I know with me, similar to your upbringing as well, it's like, and a lot of other Filipino Americans that I've chatted with, as our parents wanted us to become doctors, and uh, and it's not even for the collective of like making people feel better, or like
Or
for helping people. It's for money. It's like, oh, there's a lot of money. The investment to this career path is gonna be very good and reflective on them. Like, oh, I have a doctor in the family now.
Oh, yeah. That's
It's
why
like,
your sister she's like, "Oh, she's a doctor
she's
in
a
the
doctor.
family."
She's a doctor
Yeah.
in the family. She followed that path. Whereas for me, yes, they've ingrained it to me. When I was a little kid, my dad would ask me, like, Tiffany, when you grow up, what would you like to be? And I would say doctor. And there's video of it. Like, there's
Cute.
evidence. There's evidence of it, and
So
I see
cute.
it. And I mean, I have that to look back at. But yes, I do feel guilt that I didn't follow that path. And at a young age, I was very creative, and which I think I got from my dad and mom. My mom likes to paint, and my dad was very good with like photography
Mhm.
and whatnot. And he always had a camera, like a video camera. And he loved to dance. So like I kind of felt like that was like my niche that I grew well acquainted with growing up, making home movies. You've seen the silly stuff that we've created a long time ago. And, that in high school, that's where it became like, okay, now I need to pick a career path, because the private school that my parents worked so hard to have us enrolled in, which is very pricey. And when I found out how much they were paying, it was almost like college. I was like, what? Yeah. We're going here? So this private high school that my sister and I went to, they had two different programs. There was the medical program and the media program. And I literally wrote, because I had to apply, 8th grade, had to apply to either one. And I wrote for both. I was like, it became to like, which one am I going to turn it, and I was freaking out. It's like, okay, if I choose the medical field, I'm going to make my parents proud. Like, this is what they wanted me to do. I don't really have a full passion for it, but here's this media program where I can learn production, I can learn editing, I can learn video production, all that stuff. And at that time I wanted to be an animator. I love Disney. So it's just like, this is where I wanted to go. And I don't know, I guess I prayed about it. I'm not sure, but I went with media. I stuck with media. And ever since then, that has become a little chip on my shoulder going into college, where I still pursue that. And I think my parents were still trying to say, oh, maybe she'll change her mind, she might change her major, but I stuck with it. And here I am today, doing what I love and enjoying it. But it was a struggle, because that guilt and shame of not choosing the right career path from an early age, it killed me. And I'm just gonna share this here, but my dad at one point gave like a little jab of an article. A lot of times he would just email me stuff, but one of them was like top 10 majors that your child shouldn't go or do, and film industry was one of them. And that was like, oh, he's just keeps jabbing, like, you picked the wrong choice, like, you're not making enough money, which, during his declining days, like, I've accepted that actually made me push harder to pursue the career I wanted, to like prove people wrong, like, hey, I can do this, I want to do this, and I'm going to make a living off of this, and support myself. And so I just kept pushing. And I think that emotional support that I didn't get from my parents with the career path kind of, lit a fire under my ass to like, hey, you can't fail. I told myself I can't fail. Got to start, made sure I had enough side hustles or jobs to like support myself when I moved out, but in the end, I got the resolution where it's like, I thanked him for pushing me so hard, even though it wasn't the path that they really wanted me to do. It's like, thank you for pushing me to get to where I am today, despite going against their ideal career choice, and so I got closure there. And one of the things I also like, I hold to my heart is like, one time I invited them to like a screening of one of the films I worked on. And, for me, like, oh, name on a credit, so cool. But he saw, and he actually told me like how proud he was of me to just stick to the path, and that kind of gave me closure. I'm like, okay, he recognizes the effort I've been pushing for all this time. That, yeah, this is what I love to do, and I found a place that I can make a living off of it. So that was nice to look back at and be like, okay, this isn't for nothing, but it wasn't easy. I've held that guilt for such a long time, and it took a long time to recognize, like, yeah, that helped me push me to be the person I am today. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just keep pursuing your dreams, whatever it may be, because, yeah, life is short.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, I think that's great that eventually it came to a point where they recognized, like, hey, like, this is what makes her happy, and that they were proud of you. But the struggle to get
The
there,
struggle,
the years
the
of
years
struggle.
of agony,
I
and like,
mean,
yeah, you doubt yourself.
right.
There's
And
moments of
it's
darkness.
that pressure of you can't fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's why my brother and I are such overachievers. As a child, I was always very confused, and in Minnesota, there weren't like a lot of like options. I guess like growing up for them, there weren't a lot of options, and now like the job market, like there's so many things that you can do, and make good money, and it doesn't have to be a 9 to 5 job. But yeah, much like you, for me, it was I was gonna be a doctor, and in elementary school, we did not go to a very good elementary school. It was in a very bad neighborhood. And the only reason my brother and I were able to go to a really good high school, one of the best high schools in the Twin Cities, is because we were smart. We got scholarships. And my mom saw kind of just like the neighborhood that we were in. It wasn't great, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity, and kids were dropping out of school, and their gangs and drugs and things. So I'm grateful that she encouraged us to go to a really good private school that got me into a really good college. But with that, it was like the pressure of you can't fail.
Mm-hmm.
You got into like a really great school, you're going to go to a good college. And I had, I was on all the honors advanced classes in
Yep.
high school, um, for pre med stuff. And then when I went to college, I like failed out of my first semester, I failed out of like all of my pre med bio classes. And it was just because moving to LA, being 18, living away from home in a dorm, kind of get in a lot of trouble. But also the desire wasn't there. It was because it was just like, oh, they told me I should do this, but it's not what makes me happy. But at 18, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I changed my major, to undeclared. I was just completely lost and confused, but I knew like I couldn't fail. So I was just like, what am I going to do? Um, and so, yeah, it was a struggle for me too. And unfortunately, to this day, I'm still like, I can't fail.
Yeah.
Every time there's something at work, like a project assigned to me, I'm like, I have to like be perfect in this. And it's a lesson for me because, as we all know, no one can be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We can only do the best we can. We cannot stress ourselves out over stuff we can't control. But that's the thing. She always made it seem like you can control everything and you can achieve anything. And it's nice and encouraging, but it's also like that's not the reality. That's not the world that we live
There's
in.
curveballs that come your way too. Yeah.
And as you know, like I've changed my career a handful of times. I became a licensed esthetician. I run my own small business for that, and then I went back into entertainment. Now I'm in finance, and and that's a thing. Like the one thing my parents did do a good job of was that they wanted us to be like the jack of all trades. So my brother and I are very skilled in a lot of things. And it took a lot of courage to explore all the career paths that I've explored, but it also made me who I am today. Like running a small business, being able to do a podcast, being able to go to my 9 to 5, multiple streams of income. I mean, in LA is super important.
Hell yeah.
And so I appreciated that with them just like encouraging us and just pushing us, but it's also very exhausting mentally and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there was a point I think that she started to accept like, hey, you don't have to have just a 9 to 5 job. You can have like your side hustles. You can make money, doing the hobbies that you love. But that was very, very hard for her to accept. It was like, because she's an accountant. She's been an accountant her whole life.
Yep.
And she's very good at numbers.
Game. Yep.
And I'm good with numbers too, but there's a creative side to me, much like you, because my dad was a musician and he worked with cars and he was very artsy and hippie, rock and roll. So I got the blend of both worlds, and that's why I can have that creative side, but I'm also very buttoned up when I need to be professional, and I do very well in my job. So I think that mix, I always thought, like, who am I? Because I have two parents that are like opposites. But I think now I'm recognizing, okay, that blend makes me very unique, and it's helping me grow and develop in in the success that I never thought I would have. So all that to say is that I still struggled over the years because of that pressure, and now it's trying to figure out, okay, like, you know what, the reality is that we're never going to be perfect, and we're all going to make mistakes, and we're going to fail at times, and that's okay. And it's just accepting failure is a part of success.
It totally is.
Yeah.
It's, you know, for me now, it's just like you take these L's, take these losses, and learn and turn them into lessons. You know, it's a learning.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, take them
Yeah.
L's, turn them into lessons. It's all a learning experience, and I think just like you, like I grew up too with like this pressure, like you need to get straight A's, you need to be this great
Oh,
student,
yeah.
like you need to be perfect. No, failure was like the scariest thing to do or overcome as a kid. Like
Yeah.
that failure is like what you don't want to do. And yes, you get shame, guilt, judgment, all that stuff on top of that. But now it's like that added pressure makes you like, okay, I internalized a lot of that guilt, and not good enough, you know, that keep the negative talk that comes from this perfectionist being that they are trying to put us in. And even if you get those straight A's, still not good enough.
Still
Not good enough. They're like, oh, you should have got that A+, or you should have got that
Should've gotten
extra
that
credit.
plus.
Get that plus sign. Even a B+ is like, oh, that's unsatisfactory. You know, like that's great to give us that extra push, but it came with, it's a double-edged sword that it came with some negative connotations too, where it wasn't good for our mental health. Of like, I need to be always this number one perfection, achieve all the things and not fail, when, like you said, part of success is failing. Like you learn from these mistakes, and there's tons of mistakes I've done in my past life that I'm learning from, you know. And for them, and I guess that's again stuff to unpack from their generation. I'm sure their parents, or our mom's parents, were pretty strict with being like, you got to do all these things. And this perfectionism, you don't feel like you ever get a break. You know, you're exhausted.
Yeah. I remember when I got my first B, because I was a straight A student. I got my first B. It was in Spanish class, and my mom's like, "What is this?" I'm like, B for bueno. She was not laughing. But I remember it was like she made such a big deal about it, and I'm like, it's not like it's like an F or like a D. It's like, it's a B. It's fine, you know? So yeah, I'll never forget that moment, because she made me feel so bad about it. And I was like 15. I'm like, what? Like, you know? And I mean, it's all tough love when you're growing up. And again, there's some good to that, I think, but mostly like very negative. And then you start to internalize that, like you said. And then you keep thinking to yourself as you're growing up, like, okay, like, is this going to be good enough? Is this going to be good enough? And who am I proving this for? Like, eventually I'm like, who am I proving this for now? You know?
It's embedded in us since a young age. And again, it's that negative talk. It's the inner being that you just created as a child is now here in adulthood and is coming back up and doubting yourself, which is not great.
I don't know if you know this, because you had brought something up earlier about like our grandparents. So on our mom's side, right? Grandpa Sims, Grandma Lewing, sorry. So my mom told me that when they're growing up, so they all went to school, went home right after school. They helped with chores, and then they would eat dinner. And when they would eat dinner, no one was allowed to like speak unless they were permitted to.
Oh,
So they had to ask for permission.
this is first time hearing this. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And then after dinner, they all had to pray the rosary every single night. So it was a very like structured like schedule. But the whole thing with like the dinner, I mean, we come together now to have a meal, to talk, to have a conversation, to spend time with each other. So I thought that was interesting. And I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to understand why she's the way she is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not, a family of what, how many, 12 people or. And so for me, it's like, oh, that's why they don't know how to express emotions or like have a conversation, maybe, is because that's how they were raised. So I want to give her some grace, but also I'm like, okay, that was like back then. And now that you've experienced life, like, why do you still want to act that way? Like when I want to express how I feel, you know? So I thought it was like interesting. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's like a glimpse into like why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
But it's like you have a choice. You can still be like that, or you can be better for your kids, and
100%
it's always a choice.
break that cycle.
Yeah.
Learn from what did or didn't work from your childhood life.
Yeah.
And hopefully make it better for the next generation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Praying the rosary every night. And they had to kneel.
Oh.
It's not like they're sitting, like they had to kneel.
All kneel. All the kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me see if I could try and bring this up with my mom. But I've never heard. Yeah, that's news.
Yeah, my mom
news
told me
to
that.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
so
and talking about guilt though,
we still gotta have it better. No, I'm just kidding.
we're lucky in that sense, but like no, talking about guilt and prayer.
Oh man.
We were raised very Catholic. In my adult life, I stopped going to church, and that's another extra guilt and shame from my mom. She knows now that I don't practice as much, or she doesn't acknowledge it, but she doesn't push it as much. Before, she used to text me like, "Did you go to church on Sunday? Did you go to church? Did you go to mass? How's mass?" Like trying to ask me and trying to get information. And my mom does ask like 21 questions in one text. So for me, when she does that, I just answer yes, and it could be yes to any of those questions. But I'm like, maybe next time, don't ask me 21 questions, and I will answer. I will actually have a conversation with you instead of like, how are you? What did you do today? Did you go to church? Like, did you do your laundry? Like all these things. I'm like, I just say yes, which one of those is the correct answer, and the rest is probably a no. But yeah, no, I definitely for a little bit of time in like my college years, stopped going to church, or I went to church because I felt guilty to not go to church. That's why I went. It was like, oh, I'm raised this way, and this was like traditionally what I would do on Sundays is go to mass. But in my adult life, that was my choice now to like continue doing that, or soon enough I became a very seasonal Catholic where I go just for the holidays,
like
Easter, Christmas, like the big ones. I recognize those times, but every Sunday. No. And then now, the added pressure from her is like raising my kid that same way. And reality check, it's not going to be that way. She could be. This is what I talk to, my kid's dad is like, she can be the religious being in his life. So freely talk about Jesus and all that fun stuff. But pushing that religious agenda is where we kind of draw the line of, if he wants to explore it, I'm all about it. Yeah. Go ahead, explore. Nothing, no harm there. But like hand feeding and just really pushing that religion is where I'm not okay. It's like he needs to be open to receiving
make that decision for himself.
Yeah, eventually. he could learn and know that Lola is going to be very religious and spiritual in that sense of the Catholic Church, but there's other religions and spiritualities that can be explored as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not leaving it just to one. Because growing up, I literally thought that was it. That was it until I got into high school.
Right. And how would you know, right?
How would I know? Because that's all we did, and that's all they talked about, and then that's all I believed for a long time. And then high school came along, and thankfully there was this world religions class where I got to learn about Buddhism, Hinduism, all the things. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and opened my eyes, and I'm like, there's more to just the one, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't want to pressure my kids to just believe that there's only one thing there. You could choose in none of them, whatever. That's your thing. I'm not here to put pressure onto people's choices.
Yeah. Yeah. When we were growing up, it was such a struggle because, my mom, of course, Catholic, goes to church. I mean, she goes to church every day now. And then my dad, like, just pronounced himself like he's an atheist, doesn't believe in God. And it was always very hard growing up because it was like, we would go to church with my mom, but my dad would stay home. And then eventually when we got older, it became more serious because my mom's like, well, now they're starting to understand what this means, but you're not there. And I mean, they're divorced now. But it's just like, it was always very confusing too. I'm like, well, Dad's not going. Why do I have to go? Like,
I was going to say,
he told me there's not a God. So, so it was very tricky. But I consider myself a very spiritual person. I believe in God. I am also, much like you, studied other religions in college. And so I kind of pull from different religions. And I think that's the beauty of having all these religions and just kind of pulling from that. But for me, it's like, hey, am I a good person? Do I respect people? Like,
right.
Do I give back to the community? Like, it's more than just like, hey, you have to believe in a list of things. And, as a woman trying to progress in society and encourage women to progress, like, there's certain things about the church that I don't necessarily agree with. So,
right.
You know what I mean? And so, it was the same with me. Like, it opened my eyes to a lot of things and the stuff that's happening in society today. I mean, separation of church and state, but also it's like, you don't have to just pick like one thing to believe in. I think if you're smart and you want to be open and explore, like, that's fine too. That should be accepted.
Right. That the choice should be an option, not a restriction.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to get political.
Yeah,
on this
no,
show,
I'm not going to political.
But, just like kind of giving you guys a view of like, we were raised like to believe just this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, it's like, you're a bad person. You're not going to go to heaven.
Right. This whole, You're
just
pray,
Tiffany. Just pray.
Just keep praying. I just gotta keep praying, guys. That's what I need to do. Prayer's so powerful. I'm not mocking it.
I'm not mocking it either.
Prayer is powerful.
I think prayer is powerful. I just think it's not the solution to everything.
It's not the solution.
It's not like the solution to everything.
That's the advice I get from my mom. Is like, you just need to pray more. She sends me things like she knows I'm going through some hardships, and she's like, here's a great prayer. Pray this. I'm like, thanks, Mom. And it's nice. She's concerned. But, there's prayer, and there's also the effort and work you need to go towards healing and all these other things on top of that. So it's not the answer to all. It's not a knock on prayer. Prayer is powerful. It shouldn't be the only solution. It's really what I'm trying to get at.
It's funny because like last month I was trying to work on something for work, and my mom's she's an accountant, so she's really good with Excel, and I couldn't figure out some formula, and like I texted her, I was like, hey, do you know like anything about this formula? Like, I'm trying to figure something out. And she's like, oh, well, let me look into it. And then like I was like, I'm just so stressed out, I'm so stressed out. And she's like, well, why don't you just pray? I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm like, well, no, I mean, that's not gonna fix the Excel formula. But thank you. Like, I mean, it's just like,
it's
okay,
the
I'm
default
asking
advice.
You. I know. Just pray about it.
Just pray.
I did eventually figure it out, but I don't think it was prayer. It was just figuring it out.
Research and blood, sweat, and tears.
Well, great conversation. I'm
Yes,
glad I
always.
got that off my chest.
Yeah, I feel so much better.
And I'm
This-
sure for our listeners, I'm sure, that was something that you guys can relate to. I'm sure there's other things that you've experienced in terms of shame. We'd love to hear about that. But also, we would love to hear from you guys what other topics you want us to cover. We have some ideas, but we, of course, love to hear from you. So follow us on our IG and send us a DM. Our IG is at First Gen Podcast.
I'll put it right here
yes.
visually. If you're watching,
magically put it on the screen.
It'll be on screen.
But yeah, let's continue to talk about
Let's
it.
continue to talk about it.
Shame.
We should get the Game of Thrones shame bell. Shame.
Oh, right.
Shame.
Oh, next time.
Next time. Thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye bye.